Hey, this is Grant Brissett talking about winning the person, not the argument. Well, Christian apologetics is about making a defense for the Christian faith and answering challenges to the Christian faith, but we're not here to win arguments.
What I find strange is that he thinks those two things are different. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Ordinarily, I have a policy of not making responses to videos other atheists have already covered, and TMM made a response to this guy just this morning. But I had to put my 2 cents in, cause this guy just bugged me. Especially the way he thinks he can win people over. Or, more specifically, what he thinks he doesn't have to do to win people over.
We can get into the arguments, but the point is, I don't really care about the arguments, I care about people. I care about sharing the good news.
And what does he think he's sharing exactly? Why should people think, 1, that there is any news to begin with, that it's not just made-up wishful thinking, and 2, that it's actually good? He might think that he just wants to share, but he also has to be taken seriously, and for that, he's got to prove that he's not full of shit. And for that, he needs to get into those arguments he wants so very badly to avoid. Bottom line, if you care about people, you have to care about the arguments.
Now, in the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman Geisler and Dr. Turek, they talk about people rejecting Christianity for 3 main reasons. Those 3 reasons are intellectual, emotional, and volitional. Some people just don't want to accept Christianity.
What I find interesting is the idea that it's just Christianity in the spotlight here, as if it's the only religion. Atheists, at least, reject theism, not just this particular religion. Of course, people in other faiths aren't exactly the hugest fans of Christianity either, but it's not as if they're rejecting it. They just have their own religious fan club. Also, Frank Turek is a jerkwad. Using his arguments is one of the quickest way to make atheists not take you seriously. Just FYI.
And Frank Turek has a brilliant question to bring out people's motivation. You can ask somebody, if you found out Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And if they say no, well, then their problem or their stumbling block isn't intellectual, even though you might be having an intellectual discussion about a point.
There is a base assumption here that it seems like most apologists make, that if God exists, he not only automatically gets our allegiance, but deserves it. The character of God doesn't matter. If he's real, we must give our loyalty. The stumbling block isn't ours. It's God's. Because if you read the Bible, God is a bad, bad man. And if any human behaved as he does, we'd have them arrested and probably executed. But this somehow doesn't occur to Christians. Somehow.
So this person might talk about the cruel God of the Old Testament, but when you ask them if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And they say no, well, there's something either emotional, maybe they were mistreated, maybe they were perceived to be mistreated, maybe they don't like Christianity, maybe they have a false caricature of what Christians are and what they should be.
Or maybe they don't. Maybe they are completely correct about Christians and still find you lot repugnant. And Christians need to drop the whole maybe they were mistreated garbage. That argument never held water. It's along the same lines as the tired old everybody knows God, they just choose to reject him crapola. It's just another way of ducking out of the responsibility of replacing faith with facts.
So the main reason I'm bringing this up is that when we're talking to someone about a different issue, there can be an intellectual stumbling block or block in the road, or there can be an emotional. So the classic example is the problem of evil. If I'm talking about the problem of evil, I might talk about, God created the potential for evil by giving us free will to accept or reject him. Right? And I can talk about the problem of evil being the cause of humanity leaving God. Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden.
The problem of evil can be rejected with just 2 words. Prove it. Again, we're back to needing an argument to win people over. The problem of evil requires that God be shown to be real, otherwise why should we take it seriously? You can't make people accept God's existence by making a case for his existence that requires the assumption that he exists. That's like saying God is real because the Bible says so, when the Bible's claim that he's real is what's under the microscope in the first place.
But if they have an emotional problem, something that maybe they were mistreated by someone in the church, then that's not really where the discussion should go.
Okay, you know what? I admit it. I am rejecting religion for emotional reasons almost as much as intellectual ones. But not because I've been mistreated, but because if I join these religions, I will be mistreated. I'm a lesbian, and Christianity will expect me to not live as I please, despite not hurting anybody by it. I'll be expected to romantically and sexually pursue only men, ew, or live alone in celibacy, and fuck that, so to speak. In fact, there are a lot of aspects to Christian values that I find quite thoroughly abhorrent. How can it be expected to win me as a person when the end goal is to make me into what I see as a worse person? Even if God does exist, I'd never join his team. I'll admit to that emotional reason for rejecting this and many other religions, on top of the intellectual problems of proving God's existence. But I see those problems as the first step to winning me over, because everything else requires his existence to even be relevant in the first place.
So we need to win the person, not the argument.
Sorry, man, that sounds like a great idea on paper, but ultimately, it's rooted in dishonesty. If you win the person and not the argument, what you've done is tricked them. You've pulled the wool over their eyes, made them accept feeling over fact, presumably because you don't have facts. After all, if you did, you would win the argument. But the goal here is not to show that your point is valid. You're not convincing, you're recruiting. You're Christianity's used car salesman. Is that really who you want to be? Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.
Even YouTubers need Ferraris. Please donate on Patreon.
Should have rated unsubscribed. Oh.